Hello and welcome to the second edition of the Global InfoSec Roundtable. I'm Michael Conway of Renaissance. I'm delighted to be joined by Resham Ganglani from Halodata and Rohit Anand from TISPL. Resham is based in Singapore and Rohit is based in India. And Renaissance, we're based in Ireland. And I'd like to just pass over to each of the guys, and maybe they just do a quick introduction. Resham?
Thanks, Michael. Good to be on the show again. So I'm Resham from Halodata. We are IT security distributor in Southeast Asia, based out of Singapore, and we have offices in Indonesia and Malaysia. And good to be back on the show.
Rohit?
Hi, this is Rohit from TISPL India. It's a great show. I think I'm liking it. Second round, let's see how it goes.
Thanks, guys. And I'm Michael from Renaissance. And Renaissance, we're based in Ireland, and we're a cybersecurity value-added distributor based in Dublin. So I guess today's topic for our conversation and the focus of the conversation is to try to get cross-border conversations and understand what's happening globally. But today's topic really is the whole area of cloud versus on-prem and on-premise, and what's happening from a global manufacturer's point of view. I guess what we probably think we see is that global manufacturers are focusing now on cloud technologies and cloud delivery. So to some extent, ignoring and dropping the on-prem focus. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I think from my side, what we're seeing is that I won't say that it's been totally dropped to a point where you don't have, or you have a lot of things that are totally cloud-based. But definitely, if you're seeing new solutions come out as SaaS consumption or on the SaaS model, it's definitely cloud first most of the time. But we still see a lot of legacy players who are still new, who are still have new products, but still launching on-prem, because I guess from this part of the world, connectivity has always been an issue. So, you know, big data or a lot of information process flow on cloud has been an issue. So on-prem is still probably preferred in many cases. Okay. Rohit?
For us, I think the government sector, cloud is a no-no, a big no when it comes to, you know, anything being hosted which is not hosted in India. Also the BFSI, banking and financial sector, the data has to be in India. So BFSI is still a combination of on-prem versus cloud, where Amazon or other providers have hosted their services in India, on top of which the manufacturers are shipping virtual appliances and things like that. But when it comes to government, it's a big no. So it's, as Resham said, there are industries where it is limited, government vertical, BFSI, and there are private sector where, you know, it's pretty open. Recently, one of the customers bought Palo Alto on Amazon, right? No device, nothing, everything is virtual. So I think it's still a mix. It'll probably be some time before people sort of mature and go towards the next level of being cloud only.
And is this, you know, come back to Resham's comment about cloud first, and that's probably something we see from a European perspective, is vendors are delivering the solutions for cloud first. All the architects are focusing on the cloud delivery, because, you know, there's advantages from they probably see the market moving that way. That's one thing, but there's also advantages in terms of how they can deliver that and how they can monetize it, I guess. But the cloud first thing is that giving a challenge to people who are saying, listen, hey, you know, let's say, as you mentioned, Rohit or Resham, governments and central governments, is that giving a challenge to these organizations, how they can adopt newer technologies? Guys,
yeah. I think for our part of the world, if we look at Singapore government, for example, they have a government commercial cloud concept where the main cloud providers have a dedicated zone or multiple zones for the government itself. And then we don't really have many data residency laws in Singapore, but in Indonesia and Malaysia, they do have data residency laws. So in those cases, like in Indonesia, right, probably the most popular cloud in Indonesia is actually Alibaba Cloud for now, because they were the first to build a data center there. They were first to host stuff there. So a lot of the unicorns per se have been putting their data on cloud. But in terms of legacy, like Rohit said, BFSI, and probably a lot of the manufacturing, they're still not moved to the cloud. And I think it's a mixture of skill set as well, right? So how much skill set is there for people to architect or go to the cloud? I don't think it is at the level that it probably is in the US, where it's been going on for a long time. Where in this part of the world, it's still a skill set shortage, and but again, driven by regulations for data residency and connectivity as well.
When you look at skill sets, I mean, I guess what we're seeing in Europe is skill sets are actually allowing, the skill sets shortage is allowing people to deliver cloud-based services, which probably to some extent minimize the requirement for too many skill sets, because it's but I guess the other part that we're seeing, data residency is a big topic, certainly from a European perspective, and even with Brexit, it's particularly an issue because it's excluded some UK vendors and some UK manufacturers who, unless they have some European data center capability, which most of them, to be fair, do, but unless they have some European data center capability, they get excluded on data residency requirements. And I think that's probably global, but I guess one of the things that we've seen, and it's interesting if either of you have any experience in that, where people have saying, listen, do you know what? We're ending sale of on-prem technologies. We're ending life and ending support. We can see it. We may not have it. It might not be this year. It may be in the next year, 18, 20, 24 months. But we're going to end support for those on-prem technologies, and that's forcing organizations to say, listen, do you know what? I can't stay there. I can't stay on-prem. Any thoughts?
I don't think. I mean, if you look at some of these cloud-based products like CASBs and all, now even DLPs, the new players are going totally on cloud, right? A lot of them are not having any kind of an on-prem technology. But as Resham said about Malaysia, Indonesia, and India as well, the data residency, and I have seen a customer challenge where they can actually showcase why the data is being hosted outside India and it doesn't contain personal information, but the customers don't want to go through the pain of getting audited by statutory or regulatory auditors and explaining them why it is happening. So a lot of people are still staying away. And so the vendors are also, vendor will always create what the customer wants. So if there is a big market of on-prem, they will never go on cloud 100%. So I think it is still a transition which will take more time before governments are okay, regulated sectors are okay, and then probably that shift we will see in countries like India or Indonesia or Malaysia.
And following that theme, Resham, do you see that the vendors following? Is it vendors driving the market, or is customers driving the market? Because it's interesting, are some customers going to be forced down the cloud route because otherwise, hey, they can't be with the latest sort of technologies, or what's happening in your region?
I think COVID has driven the market, to be honest, because I think COVID has caused at least some data, some activity to hit the cloud in any industry, right? I mean, we're using Teams, or we're using Zoom. A lot of this was not allowed. And today I have customers saying, oh, you can only use WebEx to connect in. So at least they're open to one kind of cloud technology. But I think going back to your previous point about manufacturers and vendors, right? I think it's a big battle between old versus new. I think legacy solutions are slow to come up with an equivalent on the cloud because they've never been built for the cloud. They were not that scalable in the first place, or they were scalable in a very on-prem methodology, clustering and stuff like that. And then if you are looking at new technology, new vendors, like Rohit mentioned Netscope, or you have other cloud-first vendors, then if you're looking at them as a solution, you'll definitely start with cloud and move to the cloud. But if you're talking about the legacy vendors of antivirus and like you see vendors of on-prem DLP or on-prem, network access control and stuff like that, if you've been aligned with that brand or that part of solution, and you're trying to use their cloud solution that they've just launched, the user experience is definitely not the same. It's far more inferior. So that may be prohibitive, especially if you've invested a lot in that brand or that product as well. So I feel that that's been the primary issue about, legacy versus new. Is the solution vendor themselves have an equivalent product available on the cloud?
It's a really interesting one. It's a who's driving what. So do the vendors satisfy the market demand, or does the market have to buy what the vendors deliver? It's an interesting dilemma. Sorry, Rohit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one or the other takes precedence at different times, right? COVID took the top slot, right? And now when COVID goes down, then the data residency and things like that. And I think somewhere the managed services thing will also add to it in time. But for now, it is primarily driven by customer regulated industry if it's a large country, right? And which we are also seeing, which Resham also mentioned, right? So I think from time to time, it'll keep changing.
Yeah, I guess a thing that we've noticed in some of the market, and Resham, you mentioned some antivirus vendors. We've noticed, as an example, the move for a lot of those to cloud-based delivery for everything really, and to the point where legacy on-premise types technologies have sort of. We see end of life in some of the brands, some of the vendors, and actually that's giving some challenges to some customers who are saying, let's say as an example, let's say the mail store as an example, there were a number of technologies that used to scan that, but they don't anymore. So that actually becomes limited. So does that give certain vendors who are saying, what, listen, we'll keep servicing that market well, does that give them a new opportunity and maybe consolidate that market a little bit differently?
I mean, for what we're seeing as well, Michael, on this point of view it's about also how comfortable the customer feels information of being breached by viruses or malware is in the hands of someone who can see it, even the vendor, right? So I was speaking to a customer where they had a cloud, we were talking about a cloud solution, and they said, but the data is anonymized. Why do you care whether it's going on the cloud or not? It's anonymized, and vendor can't see. The vendor will only know that there's such a malware existing in this part of the world, and that's it. They said, no. We don't want anyone to know that we've been breached before we do.
Yeah.
And that is true to a certain extent, but I always feel you go back to the vendor to get it fixed anyway. So why have that apprehension? But that's the mentality at times. We want to know we're breached first before the vendor does.
So I think, are you saying that nobody in your region trusts the vendors?
I won't say nobody. I'll say some. I guess it's also about control, right? When you put things on the cloud, whether it's IaaS or PaaS or SaaS model, you have to lose some control. Whereas on-prem, who goes in the server room, when they go, what they do, how they do, everything's within your control. And I think from a cloud perspective, you don't know. Half the time, you don't know where your data is, if you're using a SaaS product. So I think that's the challenge, right? Do they feel comfortable? Do they feel comfortable with other people knowing parts of what they do? Who's assessing their data, right? From which part of the world, which part of the country? Should I let the vendors know this? And this is probably one of the reasons as well. And especially when you talk about, the ransomware and the antivirus stuff, right? So, if there are a lot of people who have used Kaseya, and recently with the Kaseya breach, right? So there were two arguments to the case, right? If you had a Kaseya on-prem and you were not breached yet, just plug out and you'll be fine. But if you were in the cloud, you were equal to Kaseya's exposure.
Yeah.
But on the reverse side of it, Kaseya could fix their cloud better and faster than they could fix your on-prem.
Yeah, because the agility to deliver something and be responsive is a lot easier in the cloud-based technologies. I guess it is interesting because we've talked quite a number of times, between in all of your regions there about data residency and who's trusting where and how. I guess our experience, we see a lot of the global vendors are really good at managing and saying, listen, you know what, we have to have a European presence. We have to have, so that sits within the GDPR region. We might have to have a German presence for the German market. We might have to have, so we're seeing a lot of these people are agile enough to have multiple locations and multiple presences. So they're taking, I would say to some extent, the larger vendors for sure are taking those objections out of that part. Right. But the other part there that you mentioned, which I think is very interesting, is the area of trusting these people, these resources. And if it's on-prem, you can do it all yourself. But what we're certainly seeing in our market is the drive towards EDR, MDR, managed services, all of those sort of things, because you know what? They can't get the staff, they can't keep the staff, they can't actually provide that labor, so they have to rely on somebody to do it. So I don't know if that's the same in your regions. I mean, Rohit, that's the same.
I think I just came from a meeting with a customer, and we are monitoring part of their data leakage systems, which includes DLP, CASB, and other stuff. And he was like, if we give it to you 100%, can we trust you, right? It is very similar situation when you go on a cloud and put everything on somebody else's infrastructure, right? And once you take that first step and move on and you see how life becomes easy, right? All those trust things can be covered under your contracts, your non-disclosure agreements, and the law of the land, right? But the thing is, barring the regulatory industry or government, I think we will see a lot faster adoption of, pure cloud-based technology. It's only about, my server warranty is getting over this year, my license renews next year, I will move it to cloud. So much so a smaller organization like us is moving the accounting system to the cloud. They have a SaaS model. We don't want anything. We want our accountants to work from home. They can work at ease. So I think, as I said, barring those two industries, which will go slow, everyone would adapt very fast. But if, like one DLP vendor, India is second or third largest market for them for on-prem. So it's a bigger question for the vendor to see whether they want to move into that direction of being cloud only or not, right? Because they don't want to lose out on this big chunk of business they get every year.
Yeah, and ultimately, I guess, and maybe it's a question for you, Resham. Obviously, the Singapore government has sort of an interesting model that they have. They're big enough to almost be their own cloud provider.
It's modeled after the FedRAMP in the US. So, where you have FedRAMP and you have multiple cloud providers on FedRAMP, it's a similar concept here, different zones for different access or different kind of public facing. And at the same time, what we're also seeing is that actually with all of this outsourced portion of the job, like Rohit's doing managed services and everything on the cloud, we're seeing also more requirements for PAM, privileged access management for the cloud. So that people can access it from different places, different kind of multi-factor authentication and stuff come into play to give access and to see what's happening and to roll back and stuff like that. But I also think one interesting point that I feel that we should also discuss is about the fact that the cloud, what is the definition of the cloud, right? Because the cloud could mean the global major players, the Alibaba, the AWS, the Google Cloud, and the Azures. Or what we are seeing is, large data centers being built in Indonesia on a local basis, calling themselves cloud because they're hosting tons of VMs, they're doing the backups, they're hosting the whole infrastructure as a service, and marketing themselves as a cloud too. So and they're doing well. Surprisingly, they're doing very, very well because people think they're moving to the cloud and then complying with data residency laws. And actually, they don't have to change their product because it's actually a Linux VM, is a Windows VM. It's not using S3 buckets. It's not using any kind of new storage that someone has to learn. And, going back to the manpower concept, the shortage of manpower is in knowledge of the cloud. Right? In countries like Indonesia and Malaysia, to a large extent, there's no real shortage of of manpower per se on people who know technology, but people who know technology that is the modernized version of it today. The Windows, the setup, the networks, everyone, there are many people who can do that, but not many people who understand what is an S3 bucket, how to scale, do the scalability on the cloud, how's the architecture different from saying a Microsoft SQL database, you know.
And moving along with that, and maybe from an Indian perspective as well, like where do you see the market then in a couple of years' time? Do you see, if we look at the motor industry, we've all driven petrol or diesel cars or fossil fuel cars. We're all, it seems like no matter what we want, we're getting electric cars or we're not getting fossil fuel cars in a couple of years' time, because it doesn't really matter what we want. It's not about demand. I'm not going to be the anti-green person or the pro-green person here. I'm just throwing it out. That's an example of we're being told what we're getting. Do you think that the vendors and they are going to ultimately tell the market what they're getting? Is it all going to be cloud delivered, or do you think some people will stick with delivering on-prem technologies?
Slowly but surely. If you remember, I think both of you remember Lotus 1, 2, 3 and Word Star days, right? Where are we? Microsoft Office for ages now. Microsoft, there's no alternate, right? Today you want to work, you go on G Suite, you don't like it, you go back to Microsoft.
That's very ageist, Rohit. We're not allowed to say these things and global things.
So let's talk future, right? Let's talk future. Look, you're going to get a desktop stream to you right now. Yeah. Microsoft Windows 11 is going to be a desktop stream. Next time you join a company, they'll ask, do you have your own laptop? Yes, okay, I'm sending you my desktop. I'm sending you my virtual desktop. The whole idea of owning hardware will go.
Yeah, Resham is talking Asus and Acer making money.
Yeah. So I guess I would say, as a wrap up type question in terms of what your vision for 5 years time, but maybe we're not talking 5 years, maybe we're talking 2 years, 3 years, and I'm not suggesting that there won't be on-prem implementations, because we all know 5 years seems like a long time in technology, but also there's an awful lot of stuff there that's old legacy technologies, Windows 2003 server running critical systems in financial institutions and things like that. But
things are changing for sure. Things are changing for sure. Like Government of India is creating its own cloud. It's already there. We call it Megraj or GI cloud or whatever, right? They are not putting data on Amazon or AWS, but they're creating their own. So in a way, the industry is getting a push, even on the government side, right? Whether it'll be flexible to put data, like I remember being in Moscow, first time signing up O365. The law said that you can have data in like Finland, Norway, 22 or 20 countries were listed in the law, right? Maybe India will also open up on the government side saying that these 5 countries or 10 countries you can have your cloud running, hosting the data, right? So there is a push definitely. And once the government cloud opens up, I think everyone opens up. Yeah. There's nothing left after that.
Yeah.
And that will certainly push the vendors to go on cloud only. Because data center is a big cost for everyone to host, the real estate, the manpower, as we discussed. If it's all managed, nothing like it. I don't need to hire people, right? Today, our DLP customers don't have to hire anybody. We manage it for them.
Yeah.
So they don't change from one to another platform, keep running the service, right?
Excellent. And same for yourselves, Resham?
I think it all depends on where we are in terms of what is being consumed. If it's going to be SaaS, device as a service, software as a service, even to large extent platform as a service, I think a lot of that people will move to the cloud by default, because they won't have a choice, or whatever they need or the scalability they need is available on the cloud. Infrastructure as a service, I think this part is debatable, because if we talk cloud as being those 5-6 main vendors, then I think in many countries they will have tough fights because they can't set up data centers in every single country in the world. That's not the model of what they want to achieve. So I think there's always going to be space for those people who are setting up local data centers and offering that as a cloud service. But so it all depends. But definitely, I don't think with the connectivity in countries not being great, not in every country being fantastic, I think there will always be a space for infrastructure as a service being offered, or even on-prem infrastructure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We talk about time and we talk about things, and it's amazing when we talk about taking away fossil fuel cars. That really sort of probably resonates very quickly. But I guess what we see in the market, certainly from a European perspective, is we probably see that. Pretty much see that the latest stuff is being delivered and it is a cloud first business. So what's happening is that people are saying, well, listen, they see the writing on the wall for the on-prem technology. They may still be using it in 3 years, 5 years, whatever, but the developments are not going to be there. So if they want to stay with what they need going forward, they need to end up there. And I think that will drive a whole bunch of other markets, as you mentioned, Resham, in terms of privileged access management, et cetera, identity authentication. Identity and authentication for all of the models that we're talking about, all the remote working, all the COVID environments, that's going to be core to everything else. So I guess it's for us to wait and see who drives the market. Is it demand or the vendors? I have my suspicion it's going to be the vendors, but we'll wait and see.
I agree.
And the great part about it is, right, we think that, the hardware vendors will suffer because there's no longer going to be much on-prem hardware. But if you look at the kind of hardware that the data centers are consuming, that these vendors don't have enough. Look at a shortage of memory. Look at a shortage of RAM. Look at a shortage of processors in the market. It's all going data centers. Right? We should get in the business of eco-friendly data centers. Like Microsoft does, put in the submarine. Well, put it at the bottom of the ocean.
But there's an interesting concept for the conversation another time, an eco-friendly data center. My gosh, yeah.
Note it down.
We'll write that one down. I'm not sure we'll do that as the next one, but look, thanks very much, guys. Resham, Rohit, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks,
and for this cross globe conversation. And we'll be publishing this on our YouTube channel, and there will be more to follow. So look out for this and for the next and the previous editions. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.